holding, you'll learn ideas and impacts in informal discussions with the community. Professionals don't know it all. For example, the solution that was implemented up in Scotts Flat would have had a detrimental effect on one of the biggest fundraisers that this county holds every year, and it didn't appear that the staff knew that. In a community, in a workshop, that would have come out and we could have avoided the situation. The last item I want to raise is concerning the budget for next year for legal services. The budget for the current year is $250,000. The proposed budget for next year is $300,000, a 20% increase. At $200 an hour, which is an unfortunate going rate for hiring an attorney these days, that's 1,250 hours for the current year, 1,500 hours, 20% increase next year. To me, it prompts the question, why will NID need 250 more hours of legal counsel in 2018 than they're experiencing in 2017? And I think this is something the board ought to take a look at. Thank you.
Hello, Diana Suarez, Colfax, California, and there's other people here from Colfax as well outside the NID District. I would like to bring up the subject of Hemp Hill Dam. It's an ongoing project that's been sitting for many years. It would offer salmon habitat. Is it counting down? Is that what it is? Okay. It would offer salmon habitat.
Yeah,
and
a little buzzer goes off when you reach 0.
Okay, I get 5 more seconds for the interruption.
Well,
All right.
before I hit the trapdoor button.
Okay, Hemp Hill, 34 seconds. Hemp Hill Dam is been sitting here for a long time. NID has been going round and round claiming there's regulations, and I read a couple articles about it. One of them was in the SAC-B from 2015, and I got some personal communication from Chris Schutz, who was a negotiator for the FERC. Tina Bartlett, a district regional manager for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, encouraged the Water District to apply for grants from Proposition 1 Water Bond to offset the costs of building a fish passageway at the dam, which she described as the ideal permanent solution. NID did not do this. Instead, and it would have cost $177,000 to remove the dam, according to Jack Sanchez, but instead, NID recently received a $177,000 grant to study removal of the dam. It seems that they are searching for a searching for a long-term solution works better for NID than solving the problem. NID did apply for a grant for the Proposition 1 water bond for nearly $12 million, but it wasn't to build a fish passageway. It was to erect another expensive dam, taking out riparian river habitat and blocking any future possibilities for salmon spawn. There's already a dam below it, 2 dams below it. Someday, maybe, those dams will go and the salmon will spawn again in the Bear River. These guys are saying no because they have no hope for the future and hope for our salmon. Our riparian, it was...
You can't get to the ocean. You can't far west.
Yeah, well, maybe if there was forward thinking and ecological stuff going on, it would.
Never had said. Doesn't go to the ocean.
Instead of focusing on the issues at hand and working from the ground up to enhance salmon habitat, NID has taken a dam proposal that they claim is for local water storage and refashioned it to try and fit whatever works at the moment. One thing is for sure, this dam isn't about improving salmon habitat or recreation.
Good morning, we're in LaFoot's Grass Valley. I'd like to invite anyone who'd like to join me in the Earth Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the earth and all life it supports. One planet in our care, irreplaceable with sustenance and respect for all. And along those lines, I'd like to quote a few verses from the Jackson Browne song, Before the Deluge. It was written in 1974, and if you listen to it, it's pretty prophetic. I won't sing it for you, but I will share some of it. It starts, some of them were dreamers and some of them were fools who were making plans and thinking of the future. With the energy of the innocent, they were gathering the tools they would need to make their journey back to nature. The middle talks about what happened to them. They pretty much capitulate because they're tired and worn out. And then it ends with, some of them were angry at the way the earth was abused by the men who learned to forge her beauty into power. And they struggled to protect her from them, only to be confused by the magnitude of her fury in the final hour. I don't know if we're coming real close to the final hour, but I think we're seeing the magnitude with all these crazy climate things that are happening. Now, one solution that the dam proposes is to take the helm with climate change and to save rainwater, because we're thinking that we might not have enough snow. Well, that's a smart solution to the possible problem. Possible, because we don't know what climate change is going to do. But I'm going to ask you to go from smart to wise, and to go from big and grand. Happy 100th birthday, NID. Big birthday present, $1.6 billion, to small, wise, and earth-friendly. So I'll admit I'm biased. I'm a 100% through and through eco-hippie. And that's how I come here, to bring that view, because that protects the earth and that's what we need to do. Okay, so here's something a little humorous, but really interesting. There's a little English town that employed beavers to take over the engineer's job. Is that my buzzer?
Please wrap up.
Okay. All right, I'm just going to read some excerpts from this real quick. In 2015, villagers in this village collectively breathed a sigh of relief when it was announced that a section of an aging culvert meant to tame the flow of water through the village would be replaced as part of a flood defense overhaul costing £290,000. Well, the culvert didn't work. So they brought in a family of beavers. So the clan of industrious, semi-aquatic rodents will get to work doing what they do best, constructing an intricate network of dams, ponds, and canals that in this instance will slow the flow of the brook and prevent upwards of 6,000 cubic meters of water from rushing into the valley-bound village below. I'll end it there and I'll share this with you, because I'm not saying that you guys need to be replaced by beavers, but what I am saying is that there are earth-friendly solutions that we would like you to consider. Thank you.
Good morning. Mike Pasner, Indian Springs Organic Farm, Penn Valley, farming with NID Water for 31 years. Back to two main topics for me. What is a Centennial Reservoir and power? These are initials for the crab dam. This needs to not happen in our community and will not happen. The people will rally and it will become a false hope of NIDs. We will stop this dam. You guys need to realize that and move in positive directions using our ratepayer money for better things. Second thing is the herbicide use for NID. There is some forward progress, which is wonderful. Berman bank spraying needs to cease. There's no reason for it. I don't understand why it happens. It doesn't protect property owners or the ditches, so I don't understand why that's happening at all. Once an excavator has gone through and excavated a ditch, it's clean for the year, It's a much better ecological and economical method for cleaning these 350 miles of ditches that you're cleaning currently with herbicides. The committee that was formed should be open to the public. Anybody should be coming to those, and there should be minutes for these meetings so that we can track what's going on with these issues and what NID is attempting to do. Glad there's some progress on that issue. Thank you very much.
Carmen Mateo. It's hard for some of us not to see the dam issue being a huge real estate scam between the signs in Auburn advertising future waterfront properties, and AECOM, the engineering company, having a huge real estate branch. So that is another thing that we would like to find out. You know, is this just a big, huge real estate scam? Because again, we do not want this kind of destructive dam in our area. Thank you.
Okay, close public comment. Move on to consent agenda, please. Oh, he's slow.
Do I get 3 minutes?
Absolutely. I apologize. I just didn't see you jumping up, but I probably am about your age.
My age, you don't jump very fast.
My point.
My name is Bob Wilder, and lived in this district, I guess you could say, all my life. During that time, the last 60 years, we have bought NID water. I remember when the Yuba Bear River project was voted in by the people in the district. The bond issue was given, accepted, and we got Rollins Lake, Jackson Meadows was worked on, raised the Scotch Flat Reservoir, and many improvements was made. Now mind you, that was, what, close to 50 years ago now. If it hadn't been for the farsightedness of those people at that time, we would be in a terrible shortage for water right here in the district today. The founders of the NID are so farsighted that that is the reason why we have the population of the NID in the district today, because they saw the need for water. That need is not going to get any smaller. Here not too long ago in our local paper, it says Southwest, U.S. preps for 120-degree temperatures. Water, water, more water. We know that that need is going to be there. And from the sounds of things this morning, global warming is foremost in a lot of people's mind. There's a difference, I believe, in global warming and climate change. If you go over to the courthouse in Nevada City, you'll see a cut out of a redwood log about yay high. And on it, it's got things that runs out, and it talks about the time when Christ was born and all that. Look closely at it. If you do, you'll see there's places where those rings are right together. It's one big black line. And then look next to it a few years later, and they're wider. Why? Water. We had water. We have to have storage. The Centennial Dam was thought of a long, long time ago. A fellow that I knew, and I ran cattle on his property, leased a piece of ground that belonged to the Nevada Irrigation District down off below the Taylor Crossing Road off of Dog Barn. And that was 60 years ago. So the NID was already gathering and thinking about the needs for the district. I hear this about the water's going to leave the district. All the water leaves the district sooner or later. It runs downhill. I believe that by being able to have construction storage at a lower elevation, we can come up with the reasoning to hold our water at the higher elevations, because the state will tell you and has told us in the past, cut your water consumption. I remember one year I was irrigating pasture and my water was cut to 1 1/2 inches a day, inches of water. I changed sprinklers in the moonlight to try to keep the pasture going, so most of the livestock that we had. The district did everything they could to keep the water here, but it all was ready, already had an earmark for Southern California. Lady and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ryan.
No clapping.
We're gonna recess for about 30 seconds.
Oh, I gotta get a picture of this.
Good morning, Nicole Ragland, Grass Valley. That blatant display is what inspired me to get up and speak today. I was going to sit quietly in back, especially after the berating that the crowd got at the last meeting, which I felt was A, unprofessional, B, extremely hard to watch, and C, disappointing, seeing that you're all elected officials. You're not appointed to these positions, you're elected. Nobody's ever gotten up and shaken my hand after I've come up here to speak. It reeks of a plant and a setup, and these childish antics need to stop. It's not the first time, John Drew. I just want to point out for the video that this is happening, that when people come to speak, they're talked down to, we're told not to clap, you clap. We still live in a democracy, the last time I checked, and do as I say, not as I do not apply, not even in this room. There are elections coming. And I don't know the seats that are up, if those of you plan on running again, but there will be a force, a great force, speaking out against you. And I will be part of that charge very proudly, because we need to have people that are not biased, but that see the whole picture and listen to their constituents. Thank you very much. Have a good morning.
Yay. Unbelievable.
Not at all.
Okay, anyone else?
Excuse me, we have an awful time hearing the speakers up there. Can the mic be turned up a little bit or something? I'd like to hear what's being said. Thank you.
Unfortunately, the microphones are mostly for recording purposes and not for amplification purposes. For those of us who are a little hard of hearing, I apologize.
A lot of it is proximal. So
Yes.
those folks that come up to the podium to speak, pull the microphone towards you, and then that will resolve that problem.
Good.
You can't hear me?
Okay. And luckily, this is all being recorded, and if you're interested in hearing what was said after the fact, it is easy to do. Thank you. We'll move on to the consent agenda, please.
Motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Second. Okay, roll call, please.
Division 1, Division 2,
Aye.
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 5.
Aye. Okay, now we'll go to general orders. We'll listen to a presentation from Aqua regarding the storage improvement.
1 second, Mr. Chair. Staff requested that item number 5, the Orchard Springs Campground Store Replacement Project, item be removed from the current agenda.
Okay. We'll do that without objection.
What?
Great.
What?
M&R had some concerns about the cost as well as the quality of the contractor, so we're going to have staff go back and review that and then report back to M&R.
So it's going back to committee.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's a reasonable request. Thank you.
And that would be a full sentence.
Okay. Now may we go to the Aqua presentation?
Board, it's my pleasure to introduce David Boland from Aqua to present the Aqua study. I'll bring up the,
Instead of advancing, just push the side or. Okay. Well, thank you, board members. And appreciate being invited up to address the board here at Irrigation District. I'm David Bolden with the Association of California Water Agencies. And I've got a very short presentation that I gave to the California Water Commission last week, and a variation of this presentation has been given to various entities around the state, specifically the Delta Stewardship Council about 3 or 4 weeks prior to that. We did have a presentation at Aqua at the town hall in Monterey back in May. There was a variation as well. What I wanted to do is summarize for the board and then, of course, accept any questions about a study that Aqua conducted some time ago, and we've been releasing the results and using the results in advocacy as an association. Just before I get started, I did want to remind of those of you who don't know that the Association of California Water Agencies actually represents 430 member agencies, and we represent public water agencies. Nevada Irrigation District, of course, is a member of Aqua and is a long-standing member. We have a lot of small irrigation districts and agricultural districts around the state. We also have some of the largest districts in California. We represent urbans as well as rural areas and coastal as well as inland areas. And so that, let's see, there we go. So what I wanted to do is just describe why we did this study and what our overall conclusions were. The first kind of overarching consideration that we came to the study with is the recognition that water does have value in the ecosystem by itself as it is flowing through the system. The hydrologic kind of context of the study about where water is in California and where, how it's used and so forth. The fact that when it's abundant, well managed, we can use storage programs to add significant value. That was a presupposition. That value is not only for consumptive purposes, but it's also for ecosystem purposes. And we have a system in California where we're doing that.
Struggling with your initial premise. Shouldn't it be ecosystems? I realize you're a statewide organization and you are looking at it statewide, but it trivializes the distinction between the different ecosystems to just say it's one all big ecosystem. But that is what just your premise is that it's all one ecosystem? Is that your premise?
Yeah, there was no, that's not.
Then you should
I
have
could slip an S in there without causing any harm to our premise.
Good, because you should. You should.
Yeah, and
Ecosystems.
yeah, we have a lot of ecosystems, but we also have a responsibility to manage the ecosystem at a highest level. And I think what we're talking about is a kind of a philosophical statement there. You know, we could slip an S in there and not cause any grief.
Not slipping it in. It's
Okay.
perfect.
Okay. So then, yes.
Do we have any handouts?
No, all I brought was the PowerPoint presentation. I'm sure that the staff can make copies of that PowerPoint and make them available. They'll probably post it on your website.
I appreciate that sometime today.
I'm not going to add any to the PowerPoint in terms of additional content. And of course, there is the study itself, and we can bring the study
I
in.
got the study.
So to belabor my point a moment longer, you say well-managed storage programs. So there's your S. But then you make it all one ecosystem. My mother was an English teacher, and
Okay.
I'm a scientist by training. So
Okay.
I really would put that S in there.
All right. Thank you.
I understand your perspective. You're coming from the state.
Well, I'm not actually coming from the state, but
Yeah, I assume that this presentation will be posted on the agenda page that goes up on the website. So it's already there. Richard is showing it to me. It's already there.
30 seconds late. That's not a problem.
And it will be there. So it will live on into posterity on our website. Thank you.
Okay.
And actually, any particular water molecule is benefiting an ecosystem where it is at that moment. So actually, I don't think there's a problem with the S or not.
But he has the S in
thanks.
programs.
Take it under advisement. I don't know that we're going to be revising the PowerPoint, but we'll talk about that. Okay. So, so the final point there, the final bullet there is that Aqua has an integrated storage policy process that we've done through our board. And we wanted to investigate the potential for integrated water storage in California, managing that storage as an integrated asset as opposed to individual project kind of focus. And the premise, of course, is that if you integrate operations of these different systems, these different facilities around the state with each other, with the existing system, and with conveyance improvements, and you look at groundwater basin management, you can get more value, more potential benefit statewide than you might if you did it in a more disaggregated sort of way. Is that the...
You just said it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what your premise was.
Right. So, so what we recognize also is the fact that we've got a kind of a principle that we're managing by in California. It was first articulated in the Delta Plan as a co-equal goals. And the idea there is that the purposes of water are to meet all the needs, all the beneficial needs in California. And ecosystem has a co-equal status, ecosystems have a co-equal status with our consumptive uses of water in California, and that's enshrined in the Delta Plan. And I wanted to just kind of put a policy context thing. This is kind of a chronology. It's an attempt to just from an Aqua perspective, again, our association perspective, of what are some important policy documents that informed our effort, and then just where the effort fits in. And the bold there kind of highlights where we are in the process. Way back in 2005, Aqua articulated a comprehensive water management policy and embraced the idea of using lots of different ways to manage water in California to achieve and to better achieve our objectives as a state. And then the Delta Plan, of course, was established in 2013, has a very specific focus on the way the Delta is managed. And the Aqua produced a statewide water action plan, which is kind of a policy document that zeroed in on what specific kinds of actions do we need to do. And it was a pretty comprehensive piece. And it influenced the California Water Action Plan, which was adopted by this administration in 2014 and has been since revised. And it also articulates a policy of the state, this administration, to try to do all of the above. It's kind of a full portfolio approach to water management. And then, of course, Prop 1 was adopted in 2014. It had $2.7 billion for public benefits of water storage. That's being administered by the California Water Commission. And what we wanted to do was put a policy piece together. You can see the cover of that piece. It's on our website. It was done in 2015, and it basically presented our recommendations as a water association to the state of California about how that program ought to be administered as we saw fit for public benefit. And then, of course, the California Water Commission did this water investment storage program and essentially set up the rules for how to administer this $2.7 billion of public benefit investment. Then we did our storage integration study, which is the subject of our presentation right now. And that was intended to inform the conversation about the need for a broad view of integration in storage. And then, of course, the final funding decisions will happen sometime after 2018, and then actual money of the 2.7 will begin to be spent on different kinds of projects after about 2022. So the point here, again, is that we're not trying to do water management using one hammer anymore, one tool, and storage is only one part of a larger context. The idea that we need better conveyance, particularly in the Delta, we need better groundwater management, and we have implementation of our Groundwater Management Act. And we need stormwater capture, much greater than it's being done now. We need recycling and desalination. It's being done, but it can be done more and more effectively. We need headwaters management, forest management, to protect that resource and to make sure that we have resilience through time. And then water transfers and markets need to be established. Some of them are in place, but we could do better there. And then, of course, demand management, trying to do more or as much with less water, or to use the water we have more efficiently. And all of those things are on the table, but they weren't the subject of the study. The study itself just focused on a hypothesis, which was that if you add a bunch of new storage, new projects that haven't actually been built yet, to the existing system, and you integrated that management, and you administered it as a system, you could get additional benefits which would improve both ecosystem resiliency, as well as water supply reliability statewide. And so we hired a consultant and became engineers. We did a modeling exercise. And the reason we wanted to do this was there had been talk at a policy level about how important new storage is, but there's never been a quantitative study of how much new storage and where would it be and what could it benefit, what kind of benefits could we find. So we got a group together within Aqua of Aqua member agencies that had different kinds of projects, that many of which were being advocated as potentially part of this $2.7 billion of public benefit for storage, but several projects that ended up not being in that mix. And so these are the projects that we analyzed within our study, and they have certain attributes, certain sizes that we brought into our model, some of which have changed since we actually did this modeling work. And this is like 2 years ago that we kind of canvassed for these projects. Many of these projects you'll recognize that have been considered for a long time. Some of the projects were actually put together for this purpose, and some of the projects actually didn't go forward and aren't part of the competition in the California Water Commission. In addition, there are 6 new projects that weren't in our study that are now part of the California Water Commission process. And many Aqua member agencies are involved with those projects as well. And we're not trying to advocate in any way any of these projects. That was not the purpose of our study. The purpose was to look at a portfolio or a suite of projects and do a quantitative analysis. And so in addition, not only did we add the storage, but we also did the modeling to add water fix as a conveyance improvement in the delta, and to see what the difference would be with and without it. And so we have some results that we can share with you. So these are where the projects are in the system. You're well aware of your location. There are other locations for these other projects, and then they fit into an existing system. The result is an addition of about 3.5 million acre-feet of combined new storage for all these projects. A lot of them are very small, and a lot of them are very large, and some of them are groundwater, and some of them are surface water, and some are conjunctive. The first premise that we had to run to ground was whether or not there's any water to actually store in these reservoirs. And one of the popular understandings of storage in California is there's no additional water. And of course, at a molecular level, that's the case. But what we wanted to do was identify whether or not there was water conceptually available in the system that could then be used for storage. And what we did is looked at different water years. One of the important things that we all recognize in California but really jumped out in the study was diversity of water years. So we classified the amount of water available by water year, and you can see the relative amount, and you can see, of course, the scales vary, so it's a little bit hard to compare these things. But basically where the arrowheads are in the system are approximately where we found that there was some water conceptually available for some of these storage projects. And then what we did is we looked at the delta situation, the outflow requirements, and one of the presuppositions of our study was existing regulatory requirements are built into this. So we modeled this additional new storage against current needs for ecosystem management and all kinds of water management responsibilities and requirements. And we noticed that there's, again, huge variability. You look at the annual total by different water years, and you can see it really jumps like it did last year. And in other years, it's critically low. And but again, one of the things that comes out is that the average isn't maybe as helpful as noticing the peaks and the small, the big years and the small years, and that really matters, because what that does is set up the premise that if you take water when it's super abundant and you store it, then you can use it for groundwater recharge and for ecosystem values in critical years when the water is not abundant. So this is an example of the scale of water we're talking about in terms of capacity, and the fact that you can integrate this, but there is a need for the recognition of north of delta and south of delta and the constraints in the delta. Our results basically is that for most years there is water available for storage. We found on average about 10 million acre feet. Again, it's important to notice the average, or it's not the key, it's the peaks. There are 22 million acre feet in wet years and only 1 million acre feet in critical years. And again, we had a capacity of 3.5 million acre feet. And we got a carryover potentially on an average, and again, average annual of 1.9 million acre feet of carryover. And what we noticed about that is that we could use that for improving reliability, again, ecosystem benefits and flexibility in our system. And you can see that if existing plus new storage projects, you can see the existing reservoirs provide a certain level of capacity, I guess, in the current system. But we can substantially increase that, particularly in wet years, with this new storage, this particular suite of new storage projects. So another benefit, of course, is that the average annual water that could be delivered is up to 400,000 acre feet. Again, on average. In some dry years, it can go up to 700,000 acre feet. So that's really an important finding right there, is that in dry years, we have a lot more water available in storage to use for all kinds of purposes. Another principle that I wanted to underscore is the fact that we didn't allocate this water in any way. We didn't try to with this study. We didn't try to say who gets what water. What we were just saying was this additional amount of water is available for all of our beneficial uses. And that means, for instance, cold water for fisheries. And a good example of how that might have benefited us is in 2015, when Lake Shasta was low, it had warm water, and we didn't have enough cold water to meet fishery flows. And if we had had this system in place in 2015, we could have met all of those objectives. So the other conclusion that's really important is the difference between conveyance, delta conveyance, the water fix, and no water fix. When you look on the left, the existing system with the additional storage has huge benefits. But if you look on the right, it has much bigger benefits in almost all years. Now, the one set of years that it doesn't really have much in the way of difference is the critical years. And that's partly about the way in which the conveyance works, and the fact that if there's not enough water in the system, you can't really move it through the delta. But you can store it, and you can move it, you can store it above, and you can store it below the delta. And the idea here is that it essentially doubles the results. So the big question, or one of the questions that we got when we were kind of taking this out on some focus group meetings before we released it was, how much of the water are you taking? Are you really draining our system? And the proportion of water that we're talking about to store and deliver is the top dark parts of each of those bars in each of the water years. And what's left in the ecosystem after this particular set of numbers are calculated is what's remaining in the bar. And you can see, fortunately, we're taking not that much of the addition of the current water. Now, in some years, the dry and critically dry years, we are taking a larger proportion of the total. But in most years, it's a relatively smaller amount, around 10%. It goes up to about 20-some-odd%. Another huge finding that's important to California as we try to implement the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is the idea that you can use some of this water for groundwater storage. And so the way the model worked is that we allocated some of it, or we suggested that some of it could be used below the delta to recharge aquifers in the San Joaquin Valley primarily. And that if you did that, on the average, you could do about 250,000 acre feet per year. That's the red line, under existing conditions without any changes in the delta conveyance, but just this new storage set of reservoirs, and just operating it to move some of that water into groundwater. But if you have delta conveyance improvements through the delta fix, you could again almost double that result. And over the entire modeling period, which was an 82-year hydrologic cycle, historical hydrology up to the present, you can see a pretty significant benefit of putting away that money in sort of on a compounding interest sort of basis, and putting a real dent in the groundwater overdraft situation. Now, it's not a silver bullet. It doesn't solve groundwater overdraft. We can't keep using the water like we are using and just expect storage to do the deal. It's going to take a full suite of effort. So some examples of integration in the CVP State Water Project system. Again, protecting the storage that is already in the system. Some of the reservoirs like Shasta and Oroville, very important assets, and protecting those assets by using this additional storage that would be added. And then again, cold water resources and temperature management, as it jumps right out, examples of the projects that are in our suite of analysis include the site Centennial, American River Conjunctive Management projects, kind of above the delta projects. And then on the below the delta, the idea of export service area could be improved. You could improve flows in the delta itself. You could also achieve groundwater sustainability and make a contribution toward that, as we showed in the last slide. And some of the facilities that are in our model that contribute more on that side would be the ones, of course, south of the delta, Los Vaqueros expansion, Temperance Flat, Tulare Lake, which is kind of a reservoir in the lake basin bottom, and that's a proposal. And then the Kern Flat, which is a conjunctive project, groundwater banking. So the conclusions, again, significant conclusions are that significant water is available, that we have capabilities to operate this system in an integrated way, and that if we were to invest in these projects or different projects, but in an additional storage sort of focus and integrate that with the system, that we could get these kinds of benefits, and that these benefits are pretty significant and need to be considered as we go forward. So what we've been doing with this study is trying to make this case that new storage is important and needs to be part of the big picture. We aren't advocating for any particular projects, as I pointed out. We're interested in how the Prop 1 process goes for the public benefits portion for some of these projects. But in addition, what we're talking about is advocating for additional new storage projects, surface and groundwater, statewide, as part of our overall water policy in California. And that's the purpose of the study. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any board member questions? Nancy?
No question, but an opinion. And I leave it as ecosystem. Because indeed, this fine study, we participated, so we get the information.
Sure.
This tells me we shouldn't go for the state monies. I think we should pay for our reservoir with our own COPs, bonds that we would do. And if the state wanted to come take our water, they could pay us for our water. This, taking their money now, would oblige us to participate, not against trying to be part of the same state, but before everybody gets up and tells everybody what my opinion is that. This fine study, I hear you, I agree, there should be more storage, but it's all about who's paying for it. If we pay for it ourselves, we retain our authority over our own destiny a little more.
Yeah, one point that, just in kind of response to just unpack again, a presupposition of our study was not that we could control what projects got built or what barriers are in the way of those projects, permitting, or how much concrete this is all going to take, or any of that kind of down the line analysis. That was not built into our study. There are some presuppositions about operation.
We were listed several times.
Oh yeah, there's quite a few.
That's
right.
not necessarily the inclination of this director, nor I think this board. Fine study.
Okay, you good?
Thanks.
If there are other comments, I'll jump in. I do have a comment. First of all, I'd like to thank Aqua for doing the study. I think this study is a significant contribution to the overall dialogue. I think that the modeling techniques you used are really the best available. And I know I have a lot of faith in MBK engineers, having worked for a number of years with Mark Van Camp and young Walt Ray, who is in the audience. And thank you. So I think this is a very, very robust study. So the information is very useful. The question I think that presents itself to this board is whether or not it is really in our benefit to participate in this program at all, which goes to Scott's point. And having been through this, I would like to present a quantitative answer to that, because that's my nature. And so I would draw your attention to figure 39 in your report. And since you don't have it in front of you.
It's there. It's minimized, it's already minimized.
Well, that's a good question.
37.
36, maybe?
And as we're talking about it, Nick, I think this has a pro-tunnel bias to it.
Chip,
Because, and I'm against the tunnels.
And it's Adobe.
I understand the state wants their tunnels.
There you go.
Figure 38.
I think the issue before us is how this impacts us.
Well, no, I'm just, we're able to talk, it's an agendized item.
You want to
I don't think that's it.
That's
You want
everybody's
figure
before us.
38 or figure 39?
That's not the right figure.
You want to go down? That one.
That's the one, right?
That's the one. That's the critical
Can you
figure.
This is the one you brought.
The one on the top.
This is the one you brought last week.
Can you,
2 weeks.
Make it bigger?
make it, go again, and again. See if you can get it full
Go,
screen.
go gadget arms.
And one more time. Just drag it, oh, that's as good as we're gonna get. Okay. I'll draw your attention to that.
Isn't this what you brought 2 weeks ago?
Yes, it
Yes,
is.
okay. What's the minute?
Okay, and this is very useful information, and thank you for doing this. This basically shows the effect on end of September carryover storage on Centennial, of operating Centennial either in a integrated fashion or as a standalone local project. So the blue bars are the end of year carryover storage, so that's the storage on September 30th of each individual year. And Walt, tell me if I'm making a mistake here, please.
Fine.
Okay. Walt works for MBK Engineers and is the one who did the modeling. The black bars that you can see are the end-of-year carryover storage without integrated operation. The blue bars are with integrated operation.
I'm unclear, are you talking horizontal line versus vertical line? And I'm not colorblind.
Each one of those bars represents
The horizontal?
a water year.
The horizontal?
The horizontal line represents the period of record. So it starts in 1922 and goes through 1996. Each one of those is a year. And so if you look up the blue bar, that is the end-of-year carryover storage in any given year. The black bar is the end-of-year carryover storage without integrated operation. Okay, so that's critical.
Yeah, that's why I'm thinking horizontal and vertical would be better.
You can see the black bars.
Oh. There's several things that are black up there.
Many black bars that are hanging in thin air.
Those are the horizontal, that's what I said, refer to them as horizontal, and then you'll start to.
Where's your
The verticals.
So the blue bars are the verticals.
The columns.
Columns.
Column versus.
Right. And so the blank space in between the blue bar and the hanging black bar is the amount of water that is essentially sacrificed from carryover storage as a result of integrated operation. Okay, so you're all on the same page. Okay, this data set is not at all difficult to analyze. A second grader can do it with a engineer's rule and a compass to act as a caliper. Very simple. What it shows that in all years over the period of record, the impact on NID's carryover storage is about 472,000 acre feet. So in other words, we're sacrificing 472,000 acre feet of water during the period of record by participating in the integrated storage program. Okay? Now, if you look at these years where there's a big difference between the blue bar and the hanging black bar, most of those are critically dry years. And so basically, in critically dry years, in the year 2032, critical year water has a market value, let's just say for sake of argument, and I think Walt will either shake his head or tell me no, arguably has a value of about $1,000 an acre foot. Okay, he agrees with that. Okay, so by giving up 472,000 acre feet, we are basically contributing to the system by participating in integrated operations about $470 million, almost $500 million. Okay, again, he's shaking his head yes. Okay, now you look at the year types where these gaps occur, and they occur mostly in critically dry years. There's some dry years in there, and there's one below normal year in there. But you do the same analysis for the critical year impact. And the critical year impact of participating in an integrated storage program is about 305,000 acre feet, which has a market value of $400 million. So it's a significant amount. Now, if you were to, for sake of argument, sell that water on the open market, it would have a value of almost $500 million. What are we getting for participating in this program? We're getting $11.9 million. Okay, so by participating in this program, we are giving away the 97.5% of the value of that water. So that's the bargain. You get $11.9 million to help build your project. We take from you about $500 million worth of water to tide the system over in critically dry years. So I agree with Scott.
Okay, so go there and say what you think.
I wholeheartedly agree with Scott. I think this is a bad deal for this district.
Would be, Nick. We're not in it. Would.
May I, when you're ready? I just want you to know I like to.
Okay, I will call on you when I'm finished.
Thank you.
I'm not finished. So, but
Well, I will wait.
I will call on you when I'm finished. And so, you know, this is a serious issue for us. And I wholeheartedly agree with Scott. I think that this does not look good for us. I wanted to put some numbers to it because it is a bad deal. Now, participating in this study, for us, I think is a fine idea. I think that one of the important things this study shows is that, according to your modeling, there's 259,000 acre feet of surplus water in the system, and that's presumably water above and beyond the needs to satisfy all water rights and in-stream flows in the system.
In our system.
In the Bear River system.
That's right, that's all the way, that would be spills from Camp Far West, so that's the whole Bear River system.
And I would note.
Quick question.
No,
where does that water go?
That flows down the Bear River, and hits the Feather River, Sock River, and into the Delta.
That mostly flows to the Delta during periods of the year when the Delta is in excess conditions and the water in the Delta is above and beyond water quality requirements in the Delta. Would you agree with that, Walt?
For the most part, there are times when Camp Far West spills and the Delta is in.
For the most part, right. That's true. So in other words, the point of this study is that there is excess winter water available in the system. But we've all known that for years. And so what storage really is aimed at is to basically to move water from periods of surplus to periods of deficit. And that's the California way.
Yeah, we have, like Dave Bowen showed, there's a lot of times when we have back-to-back dry years, and there's a lot of times we have a lot of surplus in the system, and the whole idea is when you have a lot of water to store it, and then you have it when we run out, and that has ecosystem benefits as well as water supply benefits. Now, one of the things I do want to point out, whether, you know, how the NID folks decide to invest and what the best economics are, one of the things that come out of the study is that there are times that you meet all of your demands within your system with the new storage. And there are opportunities for neighboring districts, say for the American River Basin, they may be able to purchase some of that water. And of course, there's a lot of agreements, wheeling agreements, and using facilities that may not be NIDs. And that funding source, as you point out, could be very significant in paying for the reservoir. And it can provide ecosystem benefits. And some of the things that we did when we did the study, we didn't look at where this water would go ultimately. If Folsom was low and they were having problems meeting temperature for, they have steelhead that stay in the river all year, and temperature for fall run spawning is an issue when Folsom's low. And the years that we brought this water over to Folsom, it had a significant temperature benefit.
I understand all those points, and I'm not in disagreement with them.
Yeah,
but I think Scott's point is that if we're going to contribute water to the system, that's water for which we deserve.
You get paid for it, absolutely. So you can
adequate compensation.
You can sell the water.
I do not believe that under this program, the integrated water storage program, we are being adequately compensated for water that we are being expected to contribute to the job.
Well, yeah,
that's my point.
We didn't identify.
I understand.
It's the low. You gotta just bring the stat.
I understand, but you know, our conundrum is whether or not to move forward with this process. And frankly, I'm not seeing much benefit for us.
Yeah, you're making great points, and I think, you know, for us, that it's not about the economics. For us,
I understand. You're a modeler.
It identifies the opportunity you have to market that water when you have it. And if you're investing it yourself, you have that opportunity to market it. And what I'm pointing out here is that there's a lot of opportunity for you to market it when you have water in excess of your needs. So there is that opportunity.
And we'll just leave the discussion right there. And thank you, and I will say, you know, I have full faith in your modeling, Walt. You are the best in the business.
Nancy's been waiting.
And Nancy's been waiting, so.
My question is for Mr. Bowman.
Yes.
In this area, we really don't have any aquifers, so we have only surface water. You're probably aware of that, but I just want to make
Quite
it,
amended, you know, individual wells.
And we have an economy that's largely based on water. We have small farms, we have large ranches, we have wineries, we have a new farm to fork movement with farmers markets. It helps stabilize our economy, water does. So when I look at the statewide integration, which I think is a great idea to look at it that way, because certainly there's a history of that not having been done. And so I think that's important. But given that the state water code prioritizes in times of emergency that there are just some bare minimum coverages, those would be for human consumption, sanitation, and fire protection. That says nothing about ag water. That is treated water. That is water for urban users mostly. So if that is state water code and our drought contingency plan follows that, then how would we protect our ag water if our water were to go to an area, an urban area? How would we protect our ag water?
So you've raised some, I guess you call policy questions that are not answered by the study. And I guess you know, if you're interested in my opinion about it, as an association, statewide association, I can give you that.
With all your experience.
I'll do that then. But just to make sure that no one expects to find the, you know, the answers to your questions in this document, because it doesn't propose even, you know, it doesn't answer those questions basically. But by getting back to the idea of local management, I guess, of the resource to make sure you're meeting local needs first. That's certainly I guess, job one for all of our member agencies. And we are an association of local entities like NID. And in terms of our overall, kind of as a statewide association, we're trying to look at how can the state and particularly in the interests of its member agencies and the ratepayers they represent, achieve, I guess you call it more resiliency to deal with those kinds of stresses that you bring up going forward. And in terms of conservation orders that come down about cutbacks on water, we deal with that as a policy issue, and of course our presupposition there is that it shouldn't be ordered top down from the state of California because they don't know the local circumstances. That's your job as a board here to manage water in terms of conservation and allocation under emergency conditions. And so we've gone through this drought, and our presupposition all along, and continues to be, and we think we've been somewhat vindicated by a PPIC study that came out about, that can analyze what happened and what was effective and what wasn't, is that local control is the way to go in California. That works, has worked, it will continue to work. And we see that as the way forward. And in terms of allocating ag versus urban, again, the context is everything. You can't just unilaterally decide at a statewide level how to allocate water under those scarce drought conditions. So that's a policy position we have. The other one, of course, being that we need, getting back to the storage thing, we need to have a more resilient system. And that we have what we call a system, but it's actually kind of an amalgamation of bits and pieces of systems that evolve through time. And we've been managing our way toward integrated management through time, the state project and the federal project and a bunch of little local projects. But in fact, we could do better there too. And so our premise with this study is more storage provides resiliency in the system. The local management of those resources is completely up to the locals. And then in terms of dealing with drought conditions going forward, we look at the hydrologic record and we have some pretty significant periods of drought and critical years, and we can expect more of that going forward and maybe a lot more of it. And so we know we need to be managing this system in a more heads-up sort of way, but that doesn't imply central control.
When you say that it would be important to make the decisions locally, we are bound by the water code, sir, and that hell could freeze over and the water would be gone. I don't see the protection here, and of course, I'm going to vote against this study and participation in any distribution of water unless we have protection for ag water, and I don't see that within the state framework.
Well, again, the study doesn't propose to distribute the water.
No, but it opens the door to the idea. And if we can argue with ourselves about whether we're going to build a dam or whether we're not going to build a dam. I have been saying all along, the issue is not, that is not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is what's the state going to do with our water? And what are we going to do to protect it? We, in the legislature, we do not have good voting power. Urban areas have the voting power. And so, in a sense, we are victims. We have the goose that lays the golden egg, the golden egg being water, but we don't have the legislative support to protect it for our own needs. And we don't have the administrative law to protect it. So we are in a very vulnerable position, and we need to stop arguing with ourselves about whether there's a dam or whether there isn't, and take care of a bigger issue, and that is, how are we going to protect our local water supply? And I'll get off the soapbox. I appreciate your coming. I'm glad for the study, but it's not good news for us. And so I think you got 3 votes right here against participation.
More time for the camera. Are there any other board questions? Staff, do you have any comments?
Nothing on College Street.
Okay, I'll open it up to the public. Please restrict your comments to the Aqua study. You don't have to raise your hand, you can just go ahead.
Go to the microphone so you're recorded.
We'll share it.
Good morning, David Edwards. Just to clarify, you mentioned the Delta plan, the Delta fix, the Delta conveyance. I presume all of those are the twin tunnels.
Yes.
And then secondly, the ACWA is a private organization of small water agencies, kind of like CSDA and other statewide organizations. Was
Not
this
exactly.
under contract with the state or within your own organizations?
Aqua is a trade association, an association of public water agencies.
Please step to the microphone.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Aqua is a trade association, an association of public water agencies, and this study was conducted by Aqua and managed by Aqua, and it was not, had no, there was no involvement by state government in this study.
Thank you.
We think of you almost as part of our lobbying arm. You represent us in many ways.
Yeah, I hesitate to say
But
that.
it's a big organization.
We do lobbying, and
Sorry,
obviously
Steph.
on legislative work, you know, some of the work we've been doing recently on water tax and other kinds of issues that are very controversial, that's what Aqua does. So we lobby for water agencies.
For the agency.
Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Peter Van Zant, Bridge Estates Road, and I'm a customer. And I'm liking what I hear from the board at this point. I look forward to a vote that will reflect what's been said so far. This is an interesting study. I think it was a study that is kind of looking for a purpose because it doesn't seem to have any state mandates going along with it. We don't know how that would happen. You know, the sites and temperance are not owned by water agencies or state projects. So we have a couple of those things. Here's another one which is not nitpicking. In the study, it says that climate change was not included. And of course, Centennial is based on the idea that climate change is going to have to drive changes in patterns, and we got to do something. So that makes it a little less applicable. It did reference that future storage projects were sourced or related to a state study. However, that isn't true. None of those numbers that are up there were sourced. These numbers are probably from NID, but where all that water is going to go from and all those graphs that are well laid out, but there's no sourcing, so I don't know where they came from. And you don't either.
Is there a question?
Where do they come from? Yeah, where do they come from?
I could answer the question if you'd like.
When I finish, that'd be very nice. Thank you. And of course, participation in this project is determined someplace in the policy or in the study, is buried in there. And it says, improved delta conveyance increases the opportunity to use project and potential transfer water stored in upstream facilities to satisfy demands south of the delta. And there's more to it, but it's really clear that this proposed system is to take water from the north and ship it through the delta down south. That's in conflict with policy that you did, I think, a couple meetings ago, where you said that an application for the Prop 1 money would not include shipping water out of the district. So, so we should worry about that. And so I think this is not a study that really zeroes in on the issues that the chairman was talking about earlier. Those are other issues, those are policy issues, and I think its policy issue should be to keep the water here, as Director Weber said. And
Where did those come from?
You're asking about the sourcing?
yeah, well, there's a lot of numbers.
It's model
of
results.
The different.
We didn't borrow it from anywhere, we generated it. We created it by taking inputs, information about the different projects, and we fed it to a model, and the model results are demonstrated in the document. So the study itself just conveys results from a modeling process. It isn't dependent upon outside sources, and it isn't related in any way to any state model or state. We are using a calcium model, which is a commonly used tool in the business, but we aren't. There's no sourcing of the inputs. You know, they're kind of built into this model, I guess, is the point.
And I guess I would go further and say, you have numbers, there's sites, there's temperance, there's groundwater, and all of those things. And they have numbers associated with them, but they're not approved at this point. So we don't know what size they're going to be. We don't know. Climate change isn't taken into consideration. So those numbers are, I'll accept that they're model numbers, but they are probably not good numbers for NID to make decisions on. Okay. Thank you.
I would argue that the numbers in the report are sufficient for NID to make a reasoned decision.
Mr. President, there's now been 2 comments about the California Water Fix project, Twin Tunnel project. If I can maybe have Dave speak to this after I'm done, but you know, Aqua, as Dave mentioned, has 430 some odd members, each one with different views of the Water Fix project, I can imagine. So Aqua has taken the policy position, I believe, Dave, that some kind of delta conveyance is beneficial. That is an Aqua position. NID's position is that you're a protestant in that State Water Board proceeding. And we've been a protestant since day one.
Yes, we have.
Some of our concerns with the project are how it could be operated. And there's a spectrum of operations that I think on one end don't affect Nevada Irrigation District or Northern California that much. On the other end of the spectrum, operations could be very damaging. There's also a question in that proceeding about what is the appropriate delta flow criteria that is, at this point, undefined. So we're very interested in that aspect of the proceeding as well. So just because Aqua has taken more of a global policy perspective on delta conveyance does not prevent its members, and in fact NID is one of those members that has some opposition and concerns with that project.
That was Dustin Cooper, Board Counsel.
Thank you.
And just to confirm, Ms. Dave Boland, Dustin's summary of Aqua's position, that is the case with the Delta Fix project. What we did was just put it in as, again, part of this modeling exercise, with and without. This is an analytical decision we made, not a advocacy position necessarily. But the point here is that what we're advocating, the point of the study actually is to advocate that more storage added and into the system and managed in an integrated way has these additional benefits. That's the crux policy position that's supported by the study. And that was its purpose only. And it wasn't intended to inform any decisions about these individual projects or about the Delta Conveyance project.
Good morning. John Bowles, candidate for Division 2. Just to tag on a few things that were said today. I appreciate the presentation from Aqua, and I think it did really bring to light some of the concerns that we all have, and I'd like to commend Ms. Weber and Nick and Scott for their comments, and hopefully the votes will reflect those comments. This truly is a roadmap, as Nancy said. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but it really is a roadmap, and it's really about our water rights. More importantly than the dam. The dam certainly has many issues of great concern for many of us. Just something I thought of yesterday was, you know, it's been proven that most of our reservoirs have perhaps up to 50% blockage with sediments. You know, even if you said they were 20, according to the U.S. Geological Study, up to 50%. Let's just say it's 20 or 25. I mean, just between Rollins and Scotts Flat alone, that would free up another 29,000 acre-feet. So the project you guys are doing at Combi, I think, is good, and I think that leads us into fixing the other reservoirs and increasing our water storage substantially.
We're also doing that at Rollins, John, removing sediment.
I'm aware of that.
Okay, all right, I didn't hear that though.
Okay, thank you.
And you did spearhead that, John.
I know.
Will has it. Before you proceed, Will.
There's been several points here about the vote, and I don't see it as an action item.
Yeah.
Is it an advisory vote or?
No, I agree with
There's
point
no
of it,
vote.
Will. It's just a presentation.
Yeah.
Here's the vote.
So there's not going to be a vote then at this time?
Nope. Today.
Okay.
Hear the presentation before we're done.
Please proceed.
Carmen Mateo. Some years ago, I did a trip down the river Ebro in Spain with the Ecologistas en Acción, and it was a month.
Can you speak up?
It was a month-long trip.
What river?
The Ebro River, it's the one with the most water in Spain.
In Spain.
Yes, and every day we stopped and talked to every town people and all the problems that had occurred with dams and quarries, nuclear plants, all along that, chemical plants, all along the same river. One of the biggest dams I've ever seen that created El Mar de Aragón in a desert format, and the problem with the sediments was enormous, to the point that right after the dam we were traveling in kayaks, and the kayaks get stuck by the enormous algae. They were huge. That and the little tiny fly, which is natural to the area, but because of the lack of sediments, they overpopulated and they became deadly to small children and made adults very sick. My problem for the last 10 years has been heavy metals. I've been dealing with treatments for heavy metals.
Do you have comments on the aqua study?
We're on a...
Yes, well, my point is the study doesn't, I haven't heard about study about good water, you know, the quality of water. And we've heard the issues with the sediments locally here. I've been spending for the past 3.5 years $1,000 a month on chelation treatments trying to remove heavy metals. Last year I had a spike, large spike in mercury that the doctor was baffled by. And I couldn't figure out, I hadn't done anything different other than maybe having gone swimming at Scott's Flat Lake a few times. It's the only thing, because I've avoided it ever since when that spike happened, trying to avoid water that isn't running freely. Thank you, that's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wilder.
Bob Wilder again. This study, back about 1982 or 83, I happened to sit on the Board of Supervisors here in Nevada County. At that time, I sat on a water committee, statewide. The indications in this study here today are no different than what it was at that time. The need is in Southern California, the supply is in Northern California. And most people understand, if they don't, 80% of the water is made north of Sacramento, but 80% of it is used south of Sacramento. At that time, the discussion was at the local level, and there was an agreement with all the supervisors from the north end of the state to the south end of the state that the counties of origin where the water was generated should have first chance at it. After that, surplus water could go to these other places. The whole gist of the study was that we needed storage both north and south. Everything went along pretty good until it got to the state legislature. Then it went to hell in a handbasket. And that has been lost. Now we're plowing the same ground again. And gentlemen and ladies, thank you for doing the job you're doing. It's a thankless thing.
Good morning, board and staff and folks that are here. I sent this note via email to the general manager. I'm not certain if you all received it. And I'll shorten this up a little bit because some of my questions have been answered. But, you know, to continue the conversation of transparency, I wanted to understand how this study was approved, whether this took board action or not to participate. So that's kind of my first question. Did you as a board affirmatively approve participation in the study?
The answer is no.
The answer is no, okay. And the second question then is, did you participate in the costs of the study?
Yes.
And how much did that cost?
$22,315.
Thank you. Let's see.
That's just the district share.
That was the district share, thank you. And was the board advised, or prior to agreeing to fund and participate in the study, was the board advised the general purpose of the study appeared to be how the district water would be sold and integrated downstream out of the district? Did anybody here know that that was part of what was happening here?
Well, so this is Aqua's study, not NID study.
Understood, but NID
And
participated.
We participated, that's correct, and the board was informed in 2016 that we were engaging in this process. And so as Aqua went through the project, it was requested from staff that we provide the data for the project for our reservoir. That reservoir data was provided to Aqua. Aqua went through the study and provided this.
And you sit on the Aqua?
I sit on the Aqua Region 3 board. I also sit on
the
Headwaters Policy Working Group, as well as the Water Management Committee. We also have members on the Ledge Committee and members on the Energy Committee.
Yes, I understand. Yeah, I understand. Thank you very much. And is it usual and customary for the management and staff to be able to commit $22,000 for a study without board approval?
Up to $50,000.
Up to
There are
$100,000, and yes.
It used to be smaller, doesn't get so expensive, it's gone up. So yeah.
So to answer the question, yes.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
No, helping out. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Will, do you want to finish that?
You know, it was approved in the warrants.
That's
I
correct.
believe in March.
So it was, the expenditure was approved in warrants in October of 2016.
Oh, well, it's close.
Thank you.
After the year, right?
Make sure I get the mic down, my level, I never managed to do that.
It hardly bends that far.
It doesn't go up tall enough either.
Get the box to stand on. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tracy Shannon. I'm with the Foothills Water Network. I appreciate all the dialogue today and discussion on the report and seeing the hydrology and other new information. So thank you for that and having that on the agenda. This discussion has really brought into focus one key question that's underlying all of this. And that has to do with what I've heard of as the board's long-term standing policy to not sell water out of the district. I'm not familiar with the policy. I have heard it here. So I have questions, and I think it's a critical public dialogue that needs to happen here because that's kind of underneath the surface. And it needs to be a transparent process so people understand it. They understand all the connections to what that policy is, what changes it. So I've written down a few questions connected to that. That would be great to answer or think about as part of this process. So first of all, if there is a policy to not sell water out of the district, when was the policy adopted? Has the policy been revisited over the years? And if so, when? Where are the policies like this made public? I actually couldn't find it. I do understand about surplus water declarations, but I haven't found this. How can the public know what policies are in place regarding out-of-district water sales? What is the board's process for changing a policy? And has this board had any public dialogue regarding this policy? Getting this history and understanding together would be really critical, I think, in this process. So I really would encourage that for your consideration. And these are just some of the questions that arise to me that could kind of frame that out. But it's not just, oops, too low that time. It's just not answers to the questions, but kind of the documents that are, connected with that. I think that would be super helpful.
Thank you.
Brent, is there such a
Well,
policy?
policy, your
No,
premise
I don't
is
believe
wrong.
there is such a policy.
There is no policy.
There is no policy.
There are a whole
This is-
series of
This
questions.
is district practice.
It's district practice. I don't think we're prepared
It is
to
not a
discuss
policy.
that today.
There is no policy. There never has been.
So it's a district practice. I think if it's something for the board to consider, to outline what the practice is and how it's been put in place through the years, maybe how that district practice has been changed, how it's been memorialized, and where can we find out more information about it? Because it's important to say there's a difference, obviously, between a practice and a policy. And a policy has certainty. Practice has no certainty.
I don't.
And this is where you would
there's a
sit
policy.
down with your elected official in your division and have that discussion.
Right.
I've had that discussion with constituents of mine.
That's
So
wonderful.
that's the mechanism. You're making it different.
No,
Creating something that
I'm making
doesn't
it
exist.
different
It's
in
not
the
a policy.
context, I'm making it different in the context of what is the framework the district is operating in now and in the future, in the context of this study, in the context of the CWC application.
I do not believe there is such a policy. As a matter of practice, we've been selling water out of district for years to the city of Grass Valley and the city of Nevada City.
That's true. And South Sutter.
That's not.
On a
that's
surplus.
not-
On a surplus.
That's not our water.
Not our water.
Okay, well, arguable,
So,
but
and also to answer the other question, all district policies are currently available on the website.
And that's where I found that, to be clear, and that's why I read through the policies, because I had heard that it's so long, from coming to these meetings, I had heard it said, so I went through the policies to look, because I think it's critical for this piece. And so one thing connected to that when you're talking about water sales, because I heard this as Director Wilcox, is how you were responding and asking questions. And some of the comments I heard from you is that it's important that you're in a way, and hopefully I'm paraphrasing you correctly, in a way that you are in control of that water because you can maximize the amount of money that would be, maybe presumably not from a water sale or otherwise.
I was merely commenting that participating in the integrated water storage program is basically discounting the water 97.5%
Right.
in value. Water has value,
Okay. Yeah, water definitely has value.
and I wasn't saying anything beyond that. So do not read anything into my comments.
I will not. I will not. Paraphrase.
who's your elected official here?
I don't. I represent the Foothills Water Network, and the network has membership, including the South Yuba River Citizens League, Sierra Club, and many constituents in the area. So I'm here to help with South Yuba River Citizens League also. And their
So you
membership.
talk to your elected official,
I
who's
do.
the most direct line.
I do. I am going to leave the board with one more piece to consider as we're listening to this, and this has more to do with water rates. And we heard water rates discussed today. And Nick smile, please. Yes. It's a difficult thing. Nancy referred to the golden egg, which in what I'm going to say here has to do with, we'll say, area of origin rights. If the district is going to choose to exercise its area of origin water rights to the state board, it's difficult, and you question the consistency in saying that that water isn't going to be put to beneficial use here, but could be used elsewhere, out of district. So I'm just leaving you with that thought. I'm not the person that's going before the water board to exercise those rights or make that argument, but I wanted to leave that for your consideration of how that fits into all of this.
The way, Tracy, you exercise your area of origin rights is to develop those rights.
Right.
Area of origin rights are not incoherent rights. And they derive basically from the ability to develop that water and put it to beneficial use. And what area of origin rights do, in effect, is to give you a priority for the development of that water over the claims of the Central Valley Project and the State Water Project to export that water.
Right.
So what area of origin rights do, in effect, is it makes the water rights of the two big projects, the Central Valley Project and the State Water Project, perpetually junior to those in the area of origin, only insofar as those rights are developed in the area of origin, put to beneficial use. And so there's a huge misconception as to what area of origin water rights apply to. But that's what they actually apply to.
No, I understand that, but my general piece in this is that we are the ones that for years have had the state filed applications water rights in reserve because they are the golden egg, and we're going to, and you're choosing to exercise
We have
those
not
water.
had that state filed application in reserve for years. That state filed application has been sitting at the Water Board. It was originally filed for other purposes in 1927. It was there for our use, but we had to take the affirmative action of filing against that state filed application, which we have done.
I just want to leave for your consideration because we know that it is an issue and a concern to have that kind of process and application to the California Water Commission. And I'll just leave it at that. And yeah, you see, and then this is it. The reminder that people have asked about whether there's action on this item, not on this item, but it is true that the board passed a resolution authorizing the general manager to sign contracts having to do with that grant. And so I'll leave you with that. That's it.
Fine.
Thank you very much. I know I went over time there. And it turned into a discussion, but it was helpful.
We're not timing here. And,
okay.
And thank you.
It was helpful. Thank you.
This is the benefit of having these items in open session, I will admit. Because then there can be some dialogue and perhaps some education that goes on.
Betsy Lombard, Nevada City. I just wanted to ask with respect, Mr. Wilcox and Mr. Miller, to not interrupt each person when they're speaking before they're done.
Thank you. Good advice. Any other public comment on this matter? Okay.
Kind of an accompanying request.
Wait.
One more. And then
just the money picture is a little fuzzy to me. And I know it was presented in a fuzzy way, but, well, hypothetical. It's $500,000 value in water, hypothetical. So my question,
$500 million.
$500 million.
Your hearing is perhaps not quite right.
Thank you for the correction. But my question is, how does the money game work with water? If it's hypothetical, when water is sold, how does that work? Who do we sell it to? Who pays for the water? That's fuzzy for me, and I'd like some clarification.
Then we can have a private conversation on that. That's a question that goes way beyond this agenda item.
Thank you.
Why private? Oh, I have a question.
Because it's not on topic.
I know. Hi, Diana Suarez, Colfax again. I heard at least 3 members of the board say that they weren't in support of the study about integrating with the rest of the system. I actually enjoyed the presentation. Thank you. I didn't think I would, but I did. What my question then is, given the board's opposition to integrating with the state as far as sharing the water, does that mean that you're considering withdrawing your application for the Proposition 1 funding that was only $12 million when your water is worth $500 million? So are you, my question is, are you considering withdrawing that application and getting out of the Prop 1 WISP process?
That's a later decision.
Sure.
Okay.
That's not an issue before us today. Okay. I'm going to move on to item number 4.
Whoa.
Oh, Nancy had a question. Sorry. I apologize.
Okay. So I'd request for a subsequent board meeting for information that I think needs to be aired. I think the ag community really needs to, I'm not trying to create chaos here, but I think the ag community needs to understand their vulnerability. So I'd like us to have the drought contingency plan come before the board and include the hardship committee guidelines with that too, please. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Hearing that, we'll move on to item number 4. Thank you, Mr. Bullen, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair, can we request a brief recess? We've been.
And again, peace and love, it was a good study. You guys were just great.
We're going to take 5.
Fine.
Short break in closed session. Short break. The short break. Closed session. It's just, I don't consider this to be a private thing.
Right. How am I doing? Good.
So good.
As far as the recording goes,
At least she lives in Florida.
Well, half a month, so
Thank you all.
So the way I've been trying to do
and that's the main volume.
that's a long
I want you to be the establishment that you are. My wife wasn't home when I dressed myself this morning.
That's right. I made my makeup. I took my Garanimals. So I say that. Some people this program. What are Garanimals? And then they're telling other people like laughing. Compressor. Compressor is a hardware device that sits behind the microphone. So you can make sure that the microphone is right behind you. So I'm watching this might be a meter, and there's nothing right now. You'll slide where you start reaching.
That's good to see you.
Your choices. So I'll look into the compressor.
And plus when we run the audio later.
That one's prophonic.
This is just for the live.
We finally got it in the truck about 3 years ago. There's no big station, right? We still don't have it at home.
Scraping the audio from the video.
That's so great.
So less steps better. There might be some additional tricks to it. But yeah, it's going to be a problem.
So I might need to know these a little bit better. But normally, I really don't touch them. I have it in the past. In the past, it's been higher. So sequence, is that what your division?
No. So I had asked
That is your division. That's Weber.
Division 2 is kind of runs off your life. So we didn't run it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's not. So we could mix it up. The only reason I didn't do it with divisions.
Good work there, Buster.
Divisions was because
Numbers are important.
Their seating changes now.
Absolutely. I like the comment about
now I don't know if these are actually
that's all you need if you know how to use them.
Nobody understands what Garanimals are.
Yeah.
Or now, that's all right. The way you read.
I'm sitting here facing this table, council's up the MRS. If I'm sitting here against the window, she's at the far end. So that's the way I did it.
That's fine.
We got up to
They're going to be watching that in a minute. See how many.
Well, now there you go. I've been married, whether you can be my brother.
it's still noted on the sheet.
No, I just opened it for a while.
Right, because anytime you're on a short break in this session, it's muted.
You're gonna cut out your breaks on the audio, but we don't want to lose anybody that might need some good audio. That's the only reason I'm doing this. Just to for the screen. Very good. That look, I'm gonna do it.
So there's no volume on the pre-meeting, short breaks, or TKO. It's the video, so it's right in there. Nothing.
The license goes to move, but then you let the guys
We had a couple different options. To either map it through here or to this. I think I'm going to move to this to go to this map.
And with the computers playing.
This other guy's used to it.
So when you have to think of
Right on, good discussion.
And then I noticed when it went.
Please come to order. Mike's on, all your conversations will be captured.
Maybe not, but I thought, good for you. No? Not at all? I thought we got that same smile right now. Life being what it is.
Mr. King.
Morning board, public and staff. This is item 4. My name is Gary King. I'm engineering manager for the district. The item 4 is a Scott Slut Spillway Phase 2 repairs financial tracking record 2094. The intent of this item is to approve a sole source contract with Alternative Structural Technologies in the amount of $142,320 for the Phase 2 repairs for Scotts Spillway and authorize the general manager to sign the appropriate documents. This is a regulatory required repair after damage occurred to our facility during the storm events this winter. These repairs are required by DSOD and FERC. These facilities will, this will finish the current repairs to the facility, and we are currently studying the future repairs to the facility, long-term repairs. This is a specialized contractor, that's why it's a sole source. ACT uses a material that's preferred by the DSOD, and that's why we're recommending them for this project. It is recommended staff approve a contract with AST in the amount of $142,320. Yes, sir.
In the packet, it said that...
Can you turn your mic on, please?
Oh, sorry, I turned it off earlier, sorry. In the packet, you reference this change to the epoxy or special resin thing that you're doing. Had we done a prior repair under their then guidelines, and now
Yes.
we're having to almost do it again?
There was a change in how they like us to handle the material that we put on top of that facility.
Right, that was in the packet. So
the
did
first
we
phase-
apply the prior?
No,
Had we
sir.
already, okay, so we're not doing it a second time?
We're doing it a different way, in
The
a
way
different location.
They changed their rules to,
In
okay.
a different
cool.
location, not the same location.
Not a redo then?
No, sir.
Good. It wasn't clear in the packet.
Yes, sir.
Under budget impact, could you please explain the hydro reservoir dam and water improvement program?
The Hydro Reservoir Dam and Water Improvement Program is a capital program inside the district capital program. What happened this year is particularly that the French Lake project got deferred due to, we're finishing up some environmental issues for that project. Those funds were available to fund this project. If not, we would have found other reserves or stuff like this, but the funds are available in that whole program.
Thank you.
It's a recommendation to engineering staff to approve the contract with AST.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Division 1,
Aye.
Division 2,
Aye.
Division 3,
Aye.
Division 4, Division 5.
Aye.
Thank you, board.
So, Ren.
Good morning, board. It's my pleasure to update you this morning on some of our activities at the district. First, as always, we have started our rain calendar. We are at 1.65 inches at Bowman. which is 115% of average. We're actually coming on a bit early. Take that as how you like. We are also currently at 18% year-to-date on 2017 conservation, and the district currently has 197,600 acre-feet in storage, which is roughly 75% of capacity and 121% of average. We are in the process of our our hydroelectric outage, and I'm pleased to report that the Dutch Flat unit is ready to go back into service. We have some voltage regulator testing that needs to occur. Chicago Park Powerhouse switch assembly is being worked on at this point. We're also shotcreting and working on the flumes there, and also the draft tube that you approved to be repaired is on its way to be rebuilt. An interesting thing Kean was sharing with me recently was that when we pulled it out and we put it in the sun, the paintwork that was 7 years old, give or take, in the areas where the draft tube was flexing, it actually is peeling off in a shape. So you can actually see how the draft tube was pulsing based on the fact that the coating wasn't applied or was coming off. I had the pleasure of touring the upper division with Dustin and Will to get them familiar with some of our facilities. On the grants front, since that's become kind of an important issue for us, we are engaged in an IPM preparation for an integrated pest management grant, which we are optimistic and have support around us to get to help our veg management program. We're also providing support to Nevada Union High School for their Careers in Outdoors Programs grant. So that grant would go to the high school, and the district would provide opportunities for their students to come shadow some of our members, do some work with the district, work with NASA in the high country, but also to do some work within the normal operating functions. Also, NID has been invited back. We did a preliminary grant with Sierra Nevada Conservancy. They liked our timber harvest plan idea for Milton and English. They've invited us back for the full proposal. One that we are going to back away from is a FEMA OES grant. There was money inside that grant for some of our flume work and some of our preparedness activities around that. The fact that it requires CEQA and NEPA means that any monies that come out of that grant pretty much are consumed by those two regulatory events. NID is currently engaging with PCWA and City of Lincoln to discuss the OFER project alternative as well, and the Regional Water Supply Project, which is the Valley View Treatment Plant. We're currently looking at the three-party agreement and how that three-party agreement will move forward in time, and whether and how to sunset that agreement and put something more firm in place. As you remember, that agreement was only supposed to run for 5 years, and it started in 2005, so we're well past its lifespan, and it's time for us to put something more permanent on the ground to protect those customers that are NID's responsibility within Lincoln. We have begun, actually we're underway with the construction on Willow Creek, so if you're on your way down to Home Depot, you will see them putting in a pipe, and that is our commitment to Placer County and to those folks that are in south-north Auburn, that will see an increased firefighting pressure and flow for those folks. We did do the final walkthrough with residents on option 3, the Table Meadows project. That's scheduled for October 7th, so we're starting to make that turn. We know that there's a couple of DFWLEs down there potentially, and it will also connect to the, God, I always get this wrong, Via del Sol?
The Tucker Family Project, which is a private project. Via del Sol. Okay. Rodeo Flat Pump Station modifications are complete, and that's back in service. The Rattlesnake BEP has been slowed down a little bit due to some county requests, so the project's having to address some requirements from the county. And then we're setting up a meeting with Lodestar Victoria DFWLE to meet with them and go over the agreement for the road repair. We've also, in your boxes, you should have received the letters to the Alta Sierra property owners and the walkthrough for Table Meadows. And
And I believe that concludes my report. Thank you. Yes, sir.
The Valley View Regional Project.
Yes, sir.
What committee is that going to come through?
It most likely would come through the APC. Okay.
It definitely needs to come through committee, and
absolutely
big discussion, huge discussion. We're moving towards a co-utilization versus an independent plant down there, right?
Yeah, I think that there's
a regional solution versus
we're exploring a regional solution or a partnered solution. I think is a better way to say that. As part of the regional water supply project, within that project there was the OFER project alternative, which is on the website, and that alternative poses an opportunity for all three of the parties involved to save money and to increase operational reliability and sustainability. So we're exploring that now. It does not, we have not crossed any boundaries in terms of a place where we would be ready to make a recommendation to any of the boards.
And there were reimbursement issues where they'd been paying the whole thing. I had my hands all over that way back when, in an effort to protect our water rights.
That's correct.
And if we were just giving them the water to treat and serve our customers, at some point the state could usurp our authority. And so very, very curious as to,
as you know,
it's you'll use it or lose it.
Yeah, I'm very conscious of that, and that's why the only part of the OPA that seems to make sense to staff at this point is one in which NID is a partner, not a contracted deliverer.
But I mean, if we can save $300 million not building a plant, that's fine.
Yes.
But I just, quite curious, I'm not on APC, but I would want to make sure that came back through committee for kicking it around. And
there are many steps ahead of us.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
For transparency to the board as well. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Bad word, real word.
Board member comments. We'll start this end. Nancy.
Last Sunday, I represented NID at the Cement Hill picnic, and of course, they're ever grateful that they got such a beautiful treated water line. Some happy people there, but one lady was quite unhappy and chastised me for our lack of transparency and also for our vegetation management practices. So I appreciate it if early on when we get our new outreach person, communications person, if it could be a high priority to explain what we're doing with the vegetation management.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I have a request. A while ago in August, I asked for information on the cash reserve and on our reserves in general, and I got a report from Marlon, thank you. I'd like to get that at a board level where we all review it, if we could. And do you have something? I'm sorry.
No, ma'am. That report was provided to all the board members.
I'm asking for it to be up for discussion, to come to the board, please, for discussion. And could we also have an update on the centennial budget, please? Probably ought to go back 2 years on that, this year and last year.
Okay.
If we could, please. Thanks.
Well,
yeah, I do have a report. As Rem said, we went on a tour last Friday. Greg was there, Dustin and Rem and I. And it was a tour in the upper division. And I hear a lot of these areas, and I wanted to get them in my head a little bit, because some of these places I haven't been to, being from Placer County, been to visiting other than perhaps driving by. So we started out at the Loma Rica Water Treatment Plant, and Chip Close was there to give us the tour of the facility, and I was really impressed by the cleanliness of it. You know, I'm used to facilities. I used to be in a rice dryer, a rice mill. There's quite a bit of difference with that. It was just really clean, and You know, the complexity of treating water and the simplicity at the same time is what I noticed. You know, some complex machines and then these simple paddle wheels too, 2x4, so causing the solids to go down. So I was just sort of impressed by both its simplicity and complexity, and the fact that only one person was there, and they don't always have to be there. They go from plant to plant and are able to see what's occurring in a SCADA system. And after that, we went to the E. George system, which is similarly clean. And Chip was there and gave us a tour of that facility. And it was at the same time the same the same complexity and simplicity. And I think last year we received reports on. We had a presentation on the what comes out of the plant right before it goes to the public, and how well the water is treated and how clean and pure it is. And I think it stems from starting with good water up here in the mountains. People are very blessed to have the water that we have up here. If you go down in the valley, they're starting from water from the river, Sacramento River, so you can imagine the difference that you have in the water. We went to the Deer Creek Hydro Plant. That was an amazing feat of engineering, and according to REM, that would serve potentially 5,000 houses. And I think it was built in the early 20th century. And
1903, I think, or 04, wasn't it? That turbine,
I guess.
They put that turbine in there?
Oh, I guess. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I was 08.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we didn't go inside, but you could hear the roar of it. That's on Deer Creek. You could hear the roar of it quite a ways away. But it was an amazing, I can imagine, amazing feat of engineering. We went to the Scotts Flat Campground after that. And I've been to the Scotts Flat Campground many times. I have never been there when there wasn't anybody there. It's in perfect order. I'm always amazed at how clean that place is as well. We did go out to the dam, across the dam. I had never been on the dam because the first time I went, there's a sign there that says "keep out." So I had never been there. It says "keep out" to me means keep out. So I guess we had permission, and we crossed over the dam and went to the spillway. And the gates were open at that time. I guess there were some gates were put up there, and we'll be discussing that at the WHO meeting, I think, in October.
Yes.
But in anticipation of the triathlon, the gates were open there. So I wanted to mention that. After that, we went to, I think we went to Scott's, we went to the ditch tenders. Alice showed that. And we went on a ride over hill and dale. I don't need to mention it. But besides being a great GM, Rem is a great driver over hill and dale.
Over hill and dale.
We took a shortcut, which I don't recommend. The VW bus. But we made it safe. After that, we went to Bear Valley. I've been to Bear Valley. I've never been to Bear Valley. And we looked at the flumes that are, I guess, 150 feet up in the air. Just an amazing bit of carpentry and engineering that goes to that flume. And we finally went to Fuller Lake. Beautiful little lake. I recommend people go in there just to relax. And we, I guess we got back about 5 or 6. So I want to thank Rem for spending the time and getting all this stuff in my head, so when we're talking about it, I can picture it.
And us not dying on Cashew Road.
Oh.
Glad you were on a road. It sounded like a cross-country adventure.
It was, at certain points, it was pretty gnarly.
I think I would characterize it as the road to Burma. But he did a great job. But fortunately, we weren't on a cliff. We were very safe in there. But, thanks, Rem. And Dustin. Great.
John?
No.
Scott?
Well, Red mentioned the letters that are going out, I guess, to both the Lodestar and the Table Meadow folks, I had heard from people. Initially we had, over the Lodestar, of course, there was all sorts of issues with the roads, and no good deed goes unpunished, always. Appreciate staff and the general manager bringing that to a successful closure with regards to nobody seems to be ranting and raving anymore about how we destroyed their roads when we dug up the roads to put in the pipe. But thank you to the board. These are infrastructures that South County has long needed, and the generosity and wisdom of this board and our co-efforts to extend water lines, these are examples of it. They were chlorinating the lines over on Table Meadow the other day. Again, everybody with the rains got fired up. Like Gary, I'm sure, suffers with constantly. Don't know if they were calling you, but Steve French is always trying to quiet them down. A friend of mine, that we really are trying to give them the water and all that. So that, thank you again. These are the manifestations of many years of trying to get things and the BEP, all these things going. Tying that in, I did a, to others, made a presentation that was lightly attended the other day, and we're probably going to do it again when there can be a larger audience, but to the board of the South County Chamber of Commerce. And they were, of course, before, it was a presentation about the Centennial Dam and asking their concerns and input and whatnot. We started off with the BEP, and everybody is just thrilled. They actually stole one of my maps and where it is so that they know where the WLEs can come and attach. And anyway, nothing but support from the South County Chamber of Commerce. Very much foreseeing the reservoir and the dam project as being a good thing and a boon to the South County. Now, this is the Chamber talking. And I actually solicited them for possible letter of support type of thing, and they were quite amenable to that. So I'll be, it could be, you know, we get the protest, but I think it would be nice to get some positive comments when our EIR comes out, but whatever. People question, and I understand, but yeah, here's another example where it's unanimous. The people that I represent are supporting of it, and these are the folks that are going to be impacted of it. Now, granted, nobody that lives right on the river was there, but the South Chamber was in favor, and we'll be glad to put that in writing. Yes, it was. You're shaking your head no. Yes, this is a fact. I was there. Don't know who the young lady is shaking her head no, but yeah, that's right. So that was a pleasant interaction.
I would just report on two things. Last week I did present on the Centennial Project to the Penn Valley Rotary, and we have a similar presentation teed up for early November in front of the Lake Wildwood Community Association. So those are some upcoming events. So at this point,
your lights.
Hopefully it's on.
Your lights.
Yeah, we're gonna. Then he can turn it off.
Yeah, then I can turn it off. Okay. So, are there any comments on items to be considered in closed session?
But you're not home. No. Just an old song.
Comments on the
lights are out.
On the directors and the managers report? Is there a place for comment on the directors and managers report?
No, there is not. Is that correct, Dustin?
If you can save it to the next meeting for public comment on non-agenda items, that would be your opportunity.
It'd sure be sweet to do it now while it's happening.
There's no legal obligation, that's up to the board.
I'd acquiesce, I'm curious. I'm curious about what this gentleman has to say.
May I say it?
It's out of order. I would follow Dustin's suggestion.
I'll say it, Mike.
Yeah. Finally,
Any comments?
Yeah, any comments on items in closed session? We have two closed session items. Conference with legal counsel regarding South Sutter protest, and an item regarding South Yuba Canal, acquisition of South Yuba Canal from PG&E. So, hearing no comments on those, we'll adjourn the meeting, and are we going to reconvene in the manager's conference room?
We're going to reconvene in East End.
East End. Okay.
Where?